Hello, and welcome to today's Cyber in a Box presentation on backup testing. This presentation is a follow-up to the Elements of Backup presentation. This presentation is brought to you through the partnership of the Wyoming Cybersecurity Action Network Committee, your local library, and our sponsor organizations. Having data backups is very important. However, backing up data is only half the job. You also need to be able to successfully restore data from those backups in the event of a data loss. As anyone who has ever lost data can tell you, nothing is as useless as a backup which cannot be restored. Testing the ability to restore data needs to address the same key elements as the backup process itself. For instance, what data do you back up, which is your data inventory? Where is it being backed up? Your backup storage media. And how often is the data being backed up, which is the backup schedule? In reality, backup and restoration are actually two halves of the same process. Therefore, testing backup and restoration processes needs to be considered as part of the overall planning and development process. So let's talk about testing. Inventory testing validates that all necessary data is actually being backed up. Some key points to check include periodically review the backup processes to ensure they include all needed data and that they reflect any changes to the data or restoration requirements. We want to ensure backup process logs are reviewed for error messages or other indications the process did not complete 100% successfully. And we want to periodically test that you can actually restore all the data you believe is being backed up. Backup storage testing ensures backup media is available and can be used. Key points to check include: is backup media stored securely and where you can access it? Remember, you cannot restore from lost or stolen media. Can the media be actually used? All storage media can age and or wear out, thus becoming unreadable. Also, we want to ensure you have the appropriate hardware and software needed to restore the data. For example, let's say you have an older desktop system which backs up to floppy disks. Great, you have backups. However, if that system is replaced by a newer system which does not have a floppy disk drive, you will not be able to restore from those backups. And something to keep in mind: just because data is backed up to the cloud or some other offsite area doesn't automatically mean that it is safe and secure. You need to validate that the other site itself is securing the data and has its own backups. You also need to consider what you'll do if you cannot communicate with that remote site. For instance, in the event of an internet outage, you may not be able to download your backup data. And if you encrypt your backups, which is certainly a good idea, you need to validate that the decryption keys themselves are stored securely and that you have access to the current keys. Without the correct keys, you will not be able to restore or use the backed up data. Therefore, you should also maintain backups of the decryption keys themselves, which of course also needs to be tested. And finally, we want to periodically test that you can actually restore all of the data you believe is being backed up. So in short, you really need to consider and test everything that is needed to restore the data. Backup schedule testing ensures that the backup frequency provides data which is fresh enough to satisfy the business process requirements. You will want to revalidate the backup frequency periodically to ensure it is appropriately modified to address changes in the types of data being used or the changes in the business process recovery times. And as always, we want to periodically test that you can actually restore all of the data you believe is being backed up. So now maybe you're thinking, what's the big deal? I have backups. Well, consider the following. During the final development of the movie Toy Story 2 in 1998, one of Pixar's sysadmins entered an incorrect command, which deleted 90% of the movie's content. The good news was Pixar ran backups every night. This enabled them to restore the data and resume development with minimal delay. Or so they thought. Unfortunately, Pixar soon discovered that the recovered data was incomplete and could not be fully used. It turns out the daily backup jobs were not executing correctly because the amount of data to back up became larger than the backup media capacity. To make matters even worse, the resulting backup error messages were not being reviewed. So let's take a step back and think about this for a minute. Even though Pixar had implemented formal daily backups, those backups were not fully usable because they failed to implement a number of the practices we've discussed in this presentation. First, they didn't ensure the backup process was modified to accommodate changes in the data. In this case, the increasing sizes and amount of data to be backed up. Secondly, they didn't ensure the backup media remained usable. In this case, that the media was of the correct capacity. Thirdly, they didn't monitor the backup status for errors. If they had, the problem could have been detected and fixed early on, before the data loss event occurred. And fourth, and most importantly, they had never tested their ability to actually restore data successfully. Pixar was only able to complete the movie on schedule because of a stroke of extraordinary luck. They found someone had made an informal copy of the entire movie while they were working from home. This allowed Pixar to merge in the incomplete data from the backups and continue production. So, in summary, developing and implementing a data backup and restoration capability is a lot like developing any other application. You need to define all your requirements for both backup and restoration operations. You need to develop your testing plan in parallel with your design. You need to ensure that you have a way to detect process errors so that problems can be identified and fixed quickly. And you have to periodically revisit the entire process to ensure it is still accurate and complete. Most importantly, periodically test the entire backup and restoration process to ensure that you can actually successfully restore all needed data. Let us remember the words from legendary coach Vince Lombardi, who said, "Practice does not make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect." This concludes the backup testing presentation. Thank you for attending, and be sure to look for more Cyber in a Box presentations.